Good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a Miskav Institute for National Security webinar. My name is Asher Fremen. I'm the Executive Director of the Miskav Institute. The Miskav Institute is Israel's leading national security policy center dedicated to ensuring a secure and thriving Israel, to strengthening and deepening our ties with the United States and with our allies and partners around the world, and to promoting a peaceful, prosperous, and integrated Middle East. You can check out our website, www.miskavins.org. Follow us on social media. You can find out about joining the Miskav Institute Leadership Circle. We have an excellent webinar for you this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ruth Wasserman Lande, Miskav Institute Senior Fellow, a former member of Knesset, a former Deputy Ambassador. Ruth, take it away.
It's an honor to be with you. Welcome to everybody that's listening. Meir ben Shabbat and Ambassador O'Brien. It's an honor for me, and I'm sure for everybody who's listening, to hear your expertise on the Middle East, a rather complex situation at the moment. Let me first tell the audience a little bit about you, although I'm sure many know. So you, Ambassador, served as the 27th U.S. National Security Advisor from 2019 to 2021, serving as the President's principal advisor on all aspects of American foreign policy and national security affairs. During your tenure, the United States orchestrated the historic Abraham Accords in the Middle East, brokered economic normalization between Serbia and Kosovo, achieved significant defense spending increases among NATO allies, and increased cooperation with America's allies across the Indo-Pacific. Prior to serving as NSA, O'Brien was the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, a very prominent and sensitive issue today for Israelis and generally worldwide. With a personal rank of ambassador, he was directly involved in the return of over 25 detainees and hostages to the United States. He's the recipient of the National Security Medal, the National Intelligence Distinguished Service Medal, the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service, the National Defense Medal, the Legion d'Honneur, Chevalier, the Republic of China, Taiwan Order of the Brilliant Star. I'm breathless, Ambassador, with Special Grand Cordon and the Kosovo Presidential Medal of Merits. Ambassador O'Brien today serves as the co-founder and chairman of American Global Strategies and as the chairman of the board of directors of the Richard Nixon Foundation. He's also a member of the Miskav Institute's International Advisory Council. I'm also very, very proud to introduce the chairman of Miskav, where I'm also a senior research fellow. Meir ben Shabbat was Israel's longest-serving national security advisor and head of the National Security Council, serving from 2017 until 2021. In this role, Ben Shabbat served as the chief Israeli architect, in fact, of the Abraham Accords, led Israel's strategic relations with the United States and other world powers, and devised Israel's strategy to counter the Iranian nuclear threat, which we shall talk about soon. In 2020, he received the U.S. Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service. Prior to serving as National Security Advisor, he served for 28 years in Israel's General Security Services, holding numerous senior positions, including head of the Southern Division responsible for Gaza, head of the Cyber Division, and head of the Counterterrorism Division, 3 minor divisions in the service. Meir ben Shabbat today serves as the chair of the Miskav Institute for National Security, Israel's leading national security policy center. So first and foremost, I welcome both of you gentlemen, very, very accomplished and very committed to the national security of both of our important countries. Just a word about myself. Of course, today a senior fellow at the Miskav Institute. I'm a former deputy ambassador at the Israeli embassy in Cairo, spent 3 whole years as an Israeli Jewish woman, at that time unmarried. So in other words, the epitome of all evil in Cairo. I also served as the advisor of former President Shimon Peres, and I was an MK for the Blue and White Party in the Knesset. Very committed to Israel's national security and very honored to moderate today's very important discussion, particularly given the situation at hand. So without further ado, I am very, very humbled to welcome you, Meir Ben Shabbat, to share with us your opening remarks. Meir, bevakasha.
Thank you, Ruth. Hello, everyone, and hello, my dear friend, Robert O'Brien, a true friend of Israel. Thank you, Robert, for your participation. With your permission, I will switch to Hebrew. בפתח דבריי אני מבקש להודות לך, עמיתי רוברט, על השותפות הנפלאה בניהול היחסים האסטרטגיים המיוחדים שבין מדינותינו כאשר כיהנת בממשל טראמפ. כפי שציינתם, במעמד הענקת אות ההוקרה המכובד בדצמבר 2020, זכינו להעלות יחדיו את היחסים שבין מדינותינו לפסגות חדשות בשורה ארוכה מאוד של נושאים. מהמאבק באיראן ועד להסכמי אברהם, שבימים אלה, למרות המלחמה, למרות האווירה, אנחנו מציינים 4 שנים לחתימתם. נפלה בחלקי זכות גדולה לעבוד איתך, לקדם יחד את האינטרסים ואת החזון המשותף, להתרשם מהדרך, מהתבונה ומהתעוזה שלך, ולראות את הפירות הראשונים של חלק מעשייתנו. ארצות הברית זכתה ביועץ מצוין לביטחון לאומי, מדינת ישראל זכתה בידיד אמת, ואני זכיתי בחבר ובשותף נאמן לדרך. אני מבקש להודות גם על התייצבותה של ארצות הברית לצד ישראל, במלחמה שמתנהלת מאז 7 באוקטובר, ולך, באופן אישי, על תמיכתך מחממת הלב, עכשיו ולאורך כל הדרך. היחסים המיוחדים בין ישראל וארצות הברית נובעים בראש ובראשונה מהערכים המשותפים שאותם אנחנו חולקים. אחר כך, מהאינטרסים המשותפים, ומההבנה של היתרונות הנובעים מהשותפות בין מדינותינו. כיום אנחנו עומדים על פרשת דרכים היסטורית. ישראל היא אומנם זו שנלחמת, אבל זו אינה רק מלחמתה. זוהי מלחמה על הסדר העולמי והאזורי. הציר הרדיקלי נלחם בישראל גם משום שהיא נתפסת כראש החץ של הציביליזציה המערבית באזור. האויבים שלנו, רוברט, הם גם האויבים שלכם. המאבק שלנו הוא גם המאבק שלכם. וכשאנו מגנים על עצמנו, אנו יודעים שארצות הברית לצידנו. כשאנו מגנים על עצמנו, צריך לומר את האמת, אנו מגנים גם על האינטרסים שלכם. ברור לחלוטין שכשאנחנו עומדים ביחד, אנחנו מנצחים, ואנחנו ננצח. לצד הכרת הטוב העמוקה שיש לנו על התמיכה ועל הסיוע הרב שאנחנו מקבלים מוושינגטון, אנחנו לא יכולים להתעלם גם מפצעי הלחץ שנלווים לכך מעת לעת. אני אתן כמה דוגמאות. כשארצות הברית דורשת להוריד את עצימות הלחימה, ולספק סיוע כלכלי שחלק גדול ממנו מגיע לחמאס ברצועת עזה, ומשמש אותה להספקת לוחמיה ולחיזוק משילותה מול האוכלוסייה, בעיניי, אני הקטן, זוהי דרישה לא מוסרית בעליל. בפועל, היא מעריכה את המלחמה, מגדילה את הסיכונים לכוחות צה"ל, מרחיקה את הסיכויים לעסקה, ומעצימה את הסבל של כולם. כשהאמריקאים לוחצים עלינו לספק מזון, חשמל, דלק, ואפילו אינטרנט, הם בעצם אומרים לחמאס, אתם תמשיכו להילחם בישראל, ואנחנו נדאג לצורכיכם. ואת זה הם אומרים בשעה שהם מוציאים, שהחמאס מוציאים להורג החטופים שלנו. ואני לא מזכיר עוד את הסאגה סביב הכניסה לרפיח, ועוד אירועים נוספים שעליהם דיברנו במעלה הדרך, והיו שנויים במחלוקת בין הממשלים. האם ככה נלחמים במי שביצע טבח כה נפשע בישראל ב7 באוקטובר? האם ככה האמריקאים בעצמם נלחמו במלחמותיהם הצודקות? תרשה לי לומר בכנות, גם באשר לציפייה לסיים את המלחמה וליום שאחרי. וושינגטון חייבת להבין שעבור ישראל שלאחר 7 באוקטובר, הכרעת חמאס היא עניין קיומי. זה לא דומה למלחמותיה של ארצות הברית בעיראק ובאפגניסטן, מלחמות שהתנהלו אלפי מיילים משטחה של ארצות הברית, ולעיתים אני שומע גורמים שונים שנוטים להביא אותם לשם השוואה. השחקנים באזור שלנו ובמערכת הבינלאומית, בהם אויבים, ידידים וכאלה שמתלבטים, עוקבים אחר המתרחש בעזה. עמדתם והתנהלותם ביחס לישראל יושפעו מהתוצאות. בכל מה שקשור למצב הפנימי ברצועת עזה, סבורני שעמדת וושינגטון מתעלמת מכך שחמאס נטוע עמוק בכל מערכות החיים ברצועה, באופן שמעמיד בספק את הסיכויים לחולל ברצועה שינוי עמוק על ידי גורמים שיקחו את המושכות ויזכו לחסות ערבית או בינלאומית במנותק מחמאס. צריך לומר את האמת, גם אם מתסכלת ומקשה על מציאת פתרונות. האוכלוסייה בעזה לא נחטפה על ידי חמאס. רוב הציבור, או לפחות חלק גדול ממנו, בחר בחמאס לשלטון. לפי הסקרים, וכאן אני אומר את הדברים בסימן שאלה, כי על אמינותם אני לא יכול לחתום, הוא היה עושה זאת שוב, אילו היו מתקיימות בחירות נוספות. אני מזכיר, מחצית מהאוכלוסייה ברצועת עזה, הם צעירים מתחת לגיל 18, שנולדו למציאות של שלטון חמאס, התחנכו במוסדות של החמאס, צרכו רק תקשורת של החמאס, מתפללים במסגדים של חמאס, ונאמנים לדרכה, גם אם הם לא מהווים חלק מהמנגנון הצבאי שלה. אם נוסיף לכך את שיעור התמיכה הגבוה בשאר חלקי הציבור, הנה רוב מוצק בעד החמאס. במידה מסוימת חמאס בעזה סיפק דמות מסוימת של צבא העם. זה מה שמסביר את התיאורים של חיילינו, על כך שכמעט בכל בית בעזה הם מצאו נשק, פירי מנהרות וכו'. קשה לי להאמין שיש בעזה ארגון בינלאומי אחד שאיננו חדור על ידי חמאס. חמאס זיהתה אותם כגורמים שבאמצעותם ניתן לספק את הצרכים בשגרה ובחירום, ופעלה מולם. מי שסבור איפה שאפשר להציב כמה דמויות נחמדות בשלטון שיצליחו לשנות את התודעה ולעקור את חמאס מליבותיהם של האנשים או ממערכות החיים, לא מבין עד כמה חמאס מושרש ברצועת עזה. כל עוד יוותר בעזה גרעין חמאס, חזק, מאורגן ומזוין, הוא יהיה גורם הכוח המרכזי ברצועה, תהא אשר תהא זהותו של מי שיוכתר באופן רשמי או אחר כמחליף. מי שמבקש ליצור תקווה ביחס לעזה, חייב לרצות לפני הכל להכחיד את הרשע, גם אם זה לוקח זמן. מנקודת מבטה של ישראל, ההרתעה שהתרסקה ב7 באוקטובר לא תשוקם אם לא יושגו כל המטרות שישראל הגדירה למלחמה הזו. אם חלילה זה יקרה, אם חלילה לא נשיג את כל המטרות, ישראל עלולה להיות מועמדת בפני איום קיומי, יגבר הפיתוי לתקוף אותה, וגם מעמדה המדיני ינזק קשות. לפיכך, מרחב התמרון שישראל יכולה להרשות לעצמה בנסיבות האלה הוא מצומצם. אני מבקש להזכיר עניין נוסף. ההנהגה של הארגון הרצחני הזה, שקיימה בקטר תפילת הודיה על הטבח ב7 באוקטובר, ממשיכה להתארח בכבוד מלכים במדינה הזו. יתרה מזו, בתקופה האחרונה, חלק מההנהגה הזו מעודד משם פיגועי התאבדות בישראל. ישראל צריכה לחסל גם את מפקדת החמאס בחו"ל. המפקדה הזו היא שהופכת את חמאס מבעיה מקומית לארגון בעל השפעה אזורית. חייבים לשים סוף גם לכך. לארצות הברית יש תפקיד גם בעניין הזה. על כל פנים, גיבוי אמריקני מוחלט לישראל הוא המפתח לשינוי המשוואה מול חמאס. אם נקבל את הגיבוי הזה, אם נקבל את ההבנה למציאות שתיארתי ברצועת עזה ולצורך לנקוט גישה יותר תקיפה, יותר אגרסיבית, שמצמצמת את משך הזמן, דומני שניתן יהיה לסיים את המלחמה כשכל המטרות מושגות, ולעמול על האתגרים הנוספים שלנו יחדיו, של ישראל ושל ארצות הברית ביחס למזרח התיכון. ואותם מפרט בהמשך.
Meir Ben Shabbat, I am very appreciative of your comments. Thank you very much for sharing them with us. And now, with your permission, Ambassador, we would very much welcome your opening remarks with the audience. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you. It's an honor to be with the Misgav Institute, and I'm privileged to serve on the International Advisory Board with my friend Meir Ben Shabbat. Meir was a great national security advisor for the state of Israel, and is owed a debt of gratitude by the Israeli and the Jewish people for his stalwart work defending the freedom and democracy and the human rights of the Israeli people, whether they be Christian, Arab, Muslim, Jewish. He stood strong for Israel through his entire career, but especially as national security advisor. And when I came into office, Meir was already the national security advisor of Israel, and he was a very kind and warm mentor to me as I took up my role for President Trump. And I think we spoke, Meir, every week or two to discuss the challenges facing our countries. And those were the same challenges, the challenges of the authoritarian regimes of the Chinas and the Russias and Irans and North Koreas that sought to change how we lived our lives, how we worshipped, how we engaged in our political affairs, how we engaged in our economic affairs. They wanted to fundamentally change our way of life. And there was no power that was more adverse to us and adverse to how we lived than the Islamic jihadists and those were the Salafist jihadists, but also the Iranian jihadists. And we had a plan, and the plan was peace, because the best way to counter these malign actors is to show that we can work together as humans. And so just this week, we marked the 4th anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords. That was the most important step towards peace and stability between Israel and its Arab neighbors in at least a generation. And it was a privilege to be involved in that monumentous undertaking with President Trump and Jared Kushner, with Bibi Netanyahu and Meir Ben Shabbat. And there were tough negotiations, and all the sides had to show courage. And in fact, one of the things I said at the time, Bibi Netanyahu and MBZ, the Crown Prince of the UAE, King Mohammed of Morocco, the King of Bahrain, showed personal courage. Because in the Middle East, to enter into a peace accord, as we've seen with Israeli leaders who've been killed and Arab leaders who've been killed, like Sadat and Rabin, it's dangerous to take on the forces of extremism and to engage in peace. And so I thought the personal courage showed by the leaders was really a remarkable outcome of the Abraham Accords. And it took political courage from President Trump. You know, we were advised by all the best foreign policy advisors over the years, don't get involved in a Middle East peace process. It's a quagmire. You'll never come out of it. It'll ruin you. It'll hurt you politically. But we knew that peace was important in the Middle East, especially to our friends in Israel. So there's no doubt there's been tremendous progress in the region towards peace and through the Abraham Accords. And there's no question in my mind that one of the reasons October 7th happened, that terrible day, was because the radicals in the region, the terrorists, wanted to disrupt the peace process. They wanted to stop the Abraham Accords from moving forward. And the Biden administration at the time was very close to bringing about a normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And so the radicals, and especially Iran, decided that couldn't happen. And so we had October 7th. And the terrible tragedy and suffering that arose therefrom. In the Middle East, Iran is becoming a regional hegemon. The Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force operates with relative impunity throughout the region. Iran's ballistic missile program extends the reach of its missiles by miles, tens of miles and hundreds of miles each year or two. That's dangerous for Israel, but it's also dangerous for our allies in Europe, our moderate Sunni allies, our Gulf Arab allies, and America. Incredibly, Iran is now spinning more centrifuges in Iran than the United States is spinning. You know, we've spent the peace dividend. We stood down our nuclear programs, but just at the time that Iran and North Korea and China have increased theirs. Iran is weeks or months away from the ability to have a nuclear weapon. And while it may be a little bit more time for them to miniaturize a weapon and weaponize it, to put it on a ballistic missile or use it on one of their aircraft. That day is coming, and it's coming very soon. And it's going to destroy the proliferation regime that's kept the peace in the area for a long time. I mean, I said the other day in an interview, can you imagine if Iran gets a nuclear weapon? Can you imagine the Turks not wanting one? Can you imagine the UAE or Saudi or the Egyptians not wanting one? So an Iranian nuclear weapon isn't just a nuclear weapon for Iran. It's going to mean nuclear weapons throughout this very volatile region. That's not good for America, and it's not good for Israel. Meanwhile, Iran, through its terrorist proxies, the Houthis, Kataib Hezbollah, Hamas, have killed American troops. They fired missiles at civilian ships, and again, they've done so with impunity. On October 7th, we saw the innocent Israelis face the worst imaginable kinds of barbarism. Toddlers executed in front of parents, parents executed in front of children, women subject to the worst types of abuse that you can imagine. This was not collateral damage. This wasn't an attack on a military base or a military target, and there were civilians killed as a result. These were attacks on civilians, aimed at civilians to kill civilians. It was the worst program we've seen in 50 years, since World War II. And our prayers go out to the people of Israel. And it's time to wipe out the Hamas terrorists who assaulted the Holy Land and to free our hostages, American hostages and Israeli hostages. My wife and I came to Israel recently and spent time at the site of the massacre at the music festival and at Kibbutz near Oz, and saw the bravery of the people, but also saw the suffering that Israel underwent. And it's something that many Americans and people around the world, unless you've been there, and unless you've talked to the parents of the hostages, unless you've talked to the parents of the dead, the siblings, the brothers, the sisters, ordinary Israelis on the street, you can't understand. Iran and the terror organizations under Tehran's command are united in their desire to destroy Israel, but also the United States and our way of life. They detest our very existence. Israel is fighting a war to secure its very survival, the kind of existential threat the United States hasn't faced since World War II. Israel fights for a just and noble cause. Now, I welcome the Biden administration's heartfelt statements of support for Israel following the October 7th pogrom. I used to repeat to my NSC staff weekly, and they may have gotten a little tired of hearing this, but I started off every meeting of our senior policy staff by saying that weakness, or even the perception of weakness, is provocative in international affairs. Alternatively, peace through strength works. It always has. Unfortunately, from our side, loud voices on the extreme left, many in America, many in Europe, many in the Middle East, are radically opposed to Israel's existence. And they're sympathetic to terrorists, to the propaganda spouted by these organizations. They've misdirected the debate of how America should support Israel. If Israel should support Israel, if the U.S. should support Israel, it's supporting the perpetrator of a genocide or the violator of human rights. Let me be clear. These radical and often, all too often, anti-Semitic voices do not speak for the rest of us. I was at Columbia. I'm a fellow at Columbia University. I was on the campus. I talked to the Jewish students. I saw the terrible demonstrations and the hate that was being spewed by these radicals against the people of Israel, against the Jewish people, but also against people who love freedom anywhere in the world. There's no voice for these radical anti-Semitic statements and propaganda in America or in Europe, for that matter. It's unbecoming, and it's the oldest form of racism and bigotry that we've seen in the world. Now, unfortunately, these voices on the left, because the demographics have changed in this country, have led to some wavering by the Biden-Harris administration in its support of Israel. There's been a temporary delay in supplying armaments to Israel necessary for Israel to defend itself against Hamas, but also against Hezbollah and Iran. Unfortunately, these deliveries have now resumed. Now, it's important for America to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, one of our greatest friends and allies. Our shared values and commitment to freedom and goodwill between the nations is what guides this bond. There can be no peace, there can be no prosperity, unless Israel is afforded the same right to self-defense as all sovereign nations are endowed with. Furthermore, Iran, the regional source of violence, hatred, and poverty, must be confronted. Threats like these will not extinguish themselves. They will continue to percolate and seek do harm to Israel and the United States again and again if given the opportunity. Now, I understand the temptation to de-escalate and to move to end wars as quickly as possible. Appeasement is always popular in a democracy because it pushes the hard questions and the hard choices and hopefully the wars down the road. But as Churchill said, and I'm paraphrasing him poorly here, we just put the bitter dregs, we drink a cup of bitter dregs, and it's all the worse for the drinking if we push it down the road. We've got to remind ourselves that we end wars by winning them, not by conceding victory. Now, I believe Israel can endure these trying times as it has done before. And the United States has a moral duty to offer Israel our strongest support in this mission. Indeed, Israel is not a charity case. Israel's security and prosperity directly affects that of Americans in the free world. And if given the tools and support, I have no doubt that Israel can restore peace and deterrence in the region. And we've seen that done in a very creative and lethal fashion over the past several days. I'll leave the rest of my comments for the questions and answers, but I just want to end by saying God bless Israel and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those very heartwarming words and for your blessings. Of course, I join you in those. And if I may, let's proceed to the questions, please. Meir ben Shabbat, Israel is currently facing quite several significant challenges from Gaza, from the West Bank, from the north in Lebanon, in Syria, from the Houthis in Yemen, militias, Shiite militias all over the place. What, in your opinion, should Israel's goals be in each one of those arenas?
לפני הכל, תודה לידידי אובריין על המילים החמות, ואני כמובן שותף גם לברכות. אני חושב שבטווח של השנה הקרובה, היינו רוצים לפני הכל לראות את איראן תחת מערכה בינלאומית, מדינית, ביטחונית וכלכלית, להשגתה מהגרעין הצבאי, לפירוק של טבעת האש שהיא בנתה סביב ישראל, לעצירת הנשק שהיא מפיצה לכל עבר, ולבלימת התוקפנות שלה. איראן היא שורש הרע באזור כולו. היא המובילה את כל השחקנים האחרים. הטיפול באיראן חייב להיות ראשון ועיקרי. שנית, לבנון וסוריה. מה שמעניין אותנו הוא בראש ובראשונה הוצאת חיזבאללה מחוץ לטווח האיום הישיר על יישובי הצפון, החזרת התושבים לבתיהם בבטחה, לאחר מכן מניעת ההתבססות האיראנית בשטחים הללו, באזורים הללו. אני מזכיר, ניצחון מובהק בעזה ישפיע גם על החזית בצפון. הוא יערער את ביטחונו של נסראללה באסטרטגיית ההתשה, יספק ללבנון המחשה לתוצאות האפשריות של מלחמה עם ישראל, וישדר מסר של נחישות, אי התפשרות מצידה של ישראל. ישראל לא תשלים עם נוכחות של חיזבאללה בטווח שמאיים על יישוביה, ותפעל לשנות זאת. היעד השלישי הוא רצועת עזה. אנחנו חותרים לרצועת עזה מפורזת צבאית, מאיומים צבאיים או מאיומי טרור, תחת שליטה ביטחונית ישראלית, ללא יכולות שלטוניות וארגוניות של חמאס, ולאחר השבת החטופים, מוקדם ככל הניתן. באשר ליו"ש, לצערנו הרב, לאור התגברות הטרור שם, וההבנה שלנו באשר לתשתיות של הטרור, בטווח של שנה, דומני שנכון יהיה לצפות שנהיה לאחר טיפול שורש, לפירוק מעוזי הטרור, לריסוק העוצמה הארגונית והכלכלית של חמאס, לחיזוק ההגנה על מרחב התפר, ולמיצוי מנופי הלחץ על הרשות הפלסטינית, בעניין עידוד טרור ופעילות לעומתית אחרת שהיא נוקטת בה מול ישראל. בעניין הזה, אני מבקש להדגיש את עמדתנו, עמדת המכון, הבעתי אותה גם בהזדמנויות קודמות, ההכרה במדינה פלסטינית וההליכים בבית הדין בהאג נגד ישראל הם פרס לחמאס, הם פרס לטרור. ההסתייגות שארצות הברית נקטה מכך היא חשובה. היא צריכה לקבל ביטוי גם בצעדים מעשיים. היעד החמישי שאליו נרצה לשאוף בטווח של שנה הוא הרחבה של הסכמי הנורמליזציה בין ישראל למדינות האזור ולמדינות נוספות מחוץ לאזור, וגיבוש קואליציה אזורית. זה חייב לבוא מתוך עמדת עוצמה ולאחר ניצחון. בשום פנים ואופן לא ניתן לעשות זאת כהתפשרות על יעדים אחרים. לא ניתן לכונן סדר אזורי חדש בלי למוטט את חמאס ובלי להשמיד את יכולותיו הצבאיות. רעיון האינטגרציה האזורית הוא חיובי, כיוון שהוא עלה בשנה החולפת, אני מבקש להדגיש, הוא לא יכול לבוא במקום הסרתו המוחלטת של איום החמאס. כמו שהסברתי קודם לכן, הקרבה הגיאוגרפית שלנו לאויב לא מאפשרת ליטול סיכונים. אני מבקש, כיוון שאנחנו מציינים מלאת 4 שנים להסכמי אברהם, לחזור ולהדגיש דברים שאמרתי בהזדמנויות קודמות. ההסכמים הללו, שממשיכים להוכיח את עצמם גם היום, נחתמו על ידי ישראל מתוך עמדת עוצמה. כך נכון שיהיה גם בהסכמים עתידיים. במישור הבילטרלי, ביחסים שבינינו, ישראל לבין ארצות הברית, הציפייה שבטווח השנה הקרובה אנחנו נראה העמקה והרחבה של השותפות בין ישראל לבין ארצות הברית בשורה ארוכה של נושאים. עם כל הצניעות, יש לישראל מה להציע לארצות הברית במו"פ, בשותפות טכנולוגית ובתחומים נוספים. בתוך ישראל, דומני שיהיה נכון לקוות שבשנה הקרובה יהיה כאן תהליך יישום של תוכנית לאומית להתעצמות חסרת תקדים, בכל התחומים ובכל הממדים. זה במקביל לרתימה של כל הכוחות החיוביים שבה, לשיכוך המתחים הפנימיים ולהגברת הלכידות וההסכמה. כדי שהאמירה, הכוחות החיוביים לא תתפרש, כפי שאינני רוצה שהיא תתפרש, אני שב ומדגיש. הכוחות החיוביים הם הכוחות שמאמינים בצורך לקיים אחדות, הם הכוחות שמאמינים בחיוניות של האחדות, כדי שנוכל לעמוד באתגרים הרבים שיש למדינת ישראל, ובמבחנים שהיא נמצאת בפניהם ושעוד נכונו לה. ישנם כאלה רבים וטובים בישראל, רוב רובה המוחלט של החברה. החוכמה היא לאחד את הכוחות הללו, להגיע להסכמות, ויחדיו לצעוד כדי להשיג את היעדים שלנו בכל שאר התחומים שמניתי. תודה.
Thank you so much, Meir. Indeed, Israel is facing very significant challenges. We have quite a few steps, significant steps, which need to be taken on all those fronts. And I must agree with you, unity amongst us within Israel is absolutely key to being able to face those challenges in the future. With your permission, Ambassador O'Brien, I would like to ask you, what do you think should be the rapprochement, or rather the deepening of the ties between the United States of America and Europe in order to face global challenges? What are the limitations for that kind of deepening relations? And how do you see that happening?
Well, that's a great question, Ruth, and thank you. So I just returned from South Korea several days ago. A little jet lag still, but I went to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. And in some ways, the questions there are the same questions that are being asked in Israel, same questions that are being asked in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, is how do we respond to evil? How do we respond to authoritarian and Marxist and tyrannical powers gaining access to nuclear weapons, the ultimate source of power that can exterminate peoples and drive the world to World War III and potentially have a global impact, even if used locally, that is almost incomprehensible. And the answer for the South Koreans, who are very concerned about their exposure to North Korea and its nuclear arsenal, is the same for Israel, it's the same for Ukraine, it's the same for all the countries that are facing these dictators on the front lines of freedom. We need to understand that there's an axis of these evil powers. I mean, in some ways, they're kind of like the villains in a Bond movie getting together. You've got Putin in Russia. You've got the Ayatollahs in Iran. You have Xi Jinping in China, the Communist Party of China. You've got Maduro in Venezuela killing his own people after he lost an election handily. You've got the remnants of the Castro organization in Cuba. These groups are all working together to help each other out. Now, they may have different ideologies. They may supply each other weapons at a different degree. But now we're seeing a real confluence of these groups. We're seeing Iran giving ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones to Russia to use against the Ukrainian people and to destroy their power grids and to kill civilians in Ukraine. Excuse me. We see the Russians giving ballistic missile technology and nuclear technology to the North Koreans to endanger the South Korean people. We see in the South China Sea, we see the bullying that's taking place by China against the Philippines, ramming their ships, trying to literally steal their islands, steal their economic prosperity, take away their patrimony, their fishing rights, their oil and gas rights. We see the threats to Taiwan, a democratic state that's shown tremendous maturity as a democracy over the past 40 years, with the parties switching back and forth in peaceful transitions of power, living a life that gives lie to the communist argument that the Chinese people need a strong hand or a whip hand to control them, that otherwise the Chinese people can't thrive in a democracy. Well, we've seen that totally belied by what's happened in Taiwan, an economically affluent, happy people, because they have the rule of law and they have liberty. And so they're being challenged, and Xi Jinping is threatening to coerce them either through military means or political or economic means to combine with the Chinese Communist Party and to give up their freedom and give up their liberty. So these challenges are very difficult. We have hot wars in Ukraine. We've got hot wars in the Middle East with Gaza and Hezbollah in Israel. And so it can look very demoralizing to the West. It can look very demoralizing in the United States and Europe and Israel. For our people who want to live in peace and prosperity, we want to go to soccer games on Saturday. We want to go to football games. We want to go to cricket matches. We want to go to the grocery store and not be molested by suicide bombers. It's a very different way of life that we live than our adversaries live. They live in a cult of death and destruction, of Marxist-Leninist party control, of dreams of a return to a Russian empire that no one wants. And so our lives are very different than the lives of our adversaries. And it's going to take tremendous, as Israel has shown, and with the deaths of the Israeli Defense Force soldiers who've gallantly fought in Gaza and are fighting in the north and against Hezbollah in northern Israel. There's sacrifice involved in maintaining our way of life, but we have to come together and look. What I tell people is I'm encouraged by the future. I'm optimistic about the great developments that we're seeing on the technology front. I once told President Trump that I probably shouldn't repeat this publicly, but he said, "Gosh, we've got a heck of a challenge with China. They're smart as heck. They work hard. There's 1.4 billion of them. How do we stand up to them?" And I said, "Look, Mr. President, we've got Silicon Valley and we've got Tel Aviv. So between the Americans and the Israelis, we're going to stand up to the Chinese, and we're going to outthink them. We're going to out innovate them. We've got ingenuity that's sparked by the freedom that we enjoy, and you can't replicate that no matter how much money you have, how much you pour into state-owned enterprises in China, how much you direct your people to do something. There's no substitute for the ingenuity and innovation that comes from freedom and from our shared Western Judeo-Christian values. So I'm optimistic, but again, we need all the democracies. We need the U.S., we need Japan, we need South Korea, we need Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, our friends across the Singaporeans, our friends across the world in the Middle East. We need friends that maybe aren't democracies, but also share our values of sovereignty, the Gulf Arab monarchies and and we need our NATO allies in Europe and the Canadians. And together, when you look at those combinations, the Bond villains that I call them, the Xi Jinpings and the Putins and the Ayatollahs, they're not the people. They're not the future that people want. Even their own people don't want their future, but they've wrested it from their people through force and blood and tyranny. People want what we have. They want democracy and liberty and prosperity and economic freedom. And so it's the great technological advances that come from that. So if we've got the will to stand up to the tyrannies, we can prevail. The West can prevail. Israel, the United States, and our allies can win this fight. But it's going to take very hard work, and it's going to take willpower to do so. And keep in mind that the adversaries are going to seek to divide us. They're going to try to divide Israel from Europe. They're going to try to divide Europe from America, and they'll do so very skillfully, using the same technology that we developed. The Chinese, the hackers and their propagandists and their TikTokers, and all of their economic wealth will seek to divide and conquer the West, and our adversaries in the Middle East, the jihadists, will try to play off Europe with its large demography of Arab and Muslim immigrants. They'll try to divide Europe from Israel and from America. So we've got to be cognizant of that. But we can stand up to these bad actors, call them out for who they are, and stand strong for freedom. And that will keep us. That'll give our kids and our grandkids the future that we want.
Ambassador, I cannot agree with you more. I mean, the fact that Iran, that's their modus vivendi, to disintegrate societies from within, to try and divide the West, whether it's Europe from the United States, whether it's other freedom-loving countries, of course, from Israel goes without saying. But as you say, the optimism may actually be born out of this unity in standing against countries that are absolutely cultivate, as you had yourself said, the cult of death. So thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate them very much. Meir, this actually brings me to my next question to you. We spoke of Iran and rather the Islamic Republic of Iran trying to divide the West, trying to disintegrate societies. In general, how would you see the current policy of the United States of America vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic of Iran? What, in your opinion, should be done in that regard?
ראשית, אם היעדים המוסכמים ביחס לאיראן זה להשיג אותה מהגרעין הצבאי, להפסיק את תוקפנותה, לבלום את הפצת הנשק שלה ואת המימון ואת המעורבות שלה בטרור, אז עליי לומר בצער שהמדיניות האמריקנית הנוכחית מול איראן לא השיגה את היעדים הללו, לא השיגה את המטרות הללו. לא זו, אלא אף זו. החיזורים של הממשל האמריקני אחרי האיראנים החלישו את מעמדה של ארצות הברית באזור כולו. הם גם נסחו תעוזה אצל האיראנים. איראן פירשה את המדיניות הזו כחולשה, כתעודת ביטוח לאי הפעלת כוח נגדה, וזה נתן לה ביטחון עצמי שהלך וגבר. חולשה מזמינה רוע. זה בדיוק מה שראינו. לצערי, גם כיום אני מזהה רמזים לכך שמתנהלים מגעי תיווך כדי להוביל את איראן לחידוש המגעים להבנות בסוגיית הגרעין. איראן כבר מזמן איננה בעיה אזורית של המזרח התיכון. היא לא בעיה של ישראל, היא בעיה עולמית. התקפת הטילים האיראנית על ישראל המחישה לעולם את הסכנות שנשקפות ממנה. לא נדרש דמיון מפותח כדי להבין איך ייראה החיבור בין הטילאות האיראנית המודרנית לבין נשק גרעיני. העולם נחשף לסכנות של איראן גם דרך הסיוע שהיא מעניקה לרוסיה במלחמה שמתנהלת באוקראינה, וגם בהפעלת רשת ארגוני הפרוקסי ובהפצת נשק איראני במודל שמאפשר הרבה ובזול. צריך גם לומר, איראן לא משלמת שום מחיר עבור תמיכתה בארגוני הפרוקסי. העובדה שהעולם לא מטיל עליה אחריות שילוחית, מנוגדת לכל היגיון וגם לכל ממה שלמדנו בנושא מוסר. לדעתי, ארצות הברית צריכה להוביל את הטיפול באיראן בשותפות עם בנות בריתה. לא רק בהיבט הגרעין, אלא גם בהיבטי תפוצת הנשק, הפעלת גורמי הפרוקסי, הנעת טרור. הגיע הזמן לרסק את המודל האיראני שבו השולח פטור מאחריותו השילוחית, פטור מהמעשים שהשליח עושה. איראן צריכה לשאת בנטל ובאחריות לפשעים ששלוחיה ובני חסותה מבצעים. המאבק בתוכניות שלה לא סובל דיחוי, המאמצים הדיפלומטיים לא ריסנו את המפלצת, קואליציה אזורית להגנה מולה היא צעד חשוב, אבל לא די בו. נדרשת מערכה רחבה, עמוקה יותר, שמשלבת מאמצים מדיניים, צבאיים וכלכליים בהובלה של ארצות הברית. ישראל תמלא את חלקה.
Thank you very much, Meir, for your very strong and pertinent words. Ambassador O'Brien, I have a very big question for you that encompasses a lot, but I'm sure you'll do well to answer. What would you advise the next US administration to do vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis the issue of promoting the Abraham Accords, of mitigating radicalism, which has already become embedded very well in the West, and incitement? Because if we look at the curricula in many of the countries in the Middle East, Jordan, the West Bank, and Gaza are by far the worst. And there are leverages which the United States of America in the international arena can use and can enforce. What would you suggest to the next US administration?
Well, listen, my days of advising the president are past, so I don't know if anyone wants to hear from what we call the peanut gallery here in America about what I think, but I appreciate you asking. It's I think we have to understand that the biggest difference, there's a continuity in U.S. foreign policy, a line that goes between Republican and Democrat administrations, and our policies are often not as far apart as the rhetoric of a political campaign might suggest. There's a kind of a steady flow. We've seen that, for example, with China. The Biden administration kept most of the Trump administration's tariffs in place or sanctions in place against the Chinese. They finally come around on TikTok and some other big issues. They're trying to rebuild the military, not very effectively, but there's some continuity that we see. But there's an area where we really disagree, where the GOP and Democrats don't have the same ground, and that's the issue of Iran. The Democrats believe that Iran can be appeased, that the way to peace in the Middle East and the way for America to get out of the Middle East and to withdraw from the wars of the Middle East is to turn the Middle East over to Iran, that Iran will somehow be a benevolent hegemon, that there's something about the Persian history that's different than the Salafist jihadist. And I understand their hope that they could pull out and we could get rid of dealing with ISIS and get rid of dealing with Al-Qaeda and let the Iranians handle it, let the Shias handle it. And they've got a 5,000-year civilization, and maybe they'll be just as benevolent as maybe they were at points in the past. And you'll talk to some of my Jewish friends here who are on the Democrat side, and they say, the Jews and Persians have always been friends. They've been friends for 3,000 years, and we've got to come to an accommodation with them. And so maybe if we just apologize enough for the coup that took place in the 50s, if we apologize for the excesses of the Shah, if we give the Iranians money, if we pay them ransom for hostages, if we turn a blind eye to their human rights abuses, maybe the Iranians will just be a good actor and be helpful in the region. They're fundamentally mistaken. And I've told this to my Democrat policymaker friends. The Iranians just aren't that into us. They're never going to come around. They're not going to be your partner. They hate us. And in fact, they're the flip side. As much as you hate the Islamic jihadists, the Islamic State, ISIS, the flip side of that is it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's just the Shia flip side of the radical Islamists that you've seen that attacked America on 9/11. And there's no difference between them, and maybe minor differences in theology of who should have succeeded the Prophet Muhammad, but their hatred of Israel is the same. Their hatred of America is the same. Excuse me, and their hatred of our way of life is the same. So to get to your question, Ruth, how do we address this? One thing I think we need to do is we've got to be honest with the American people and the people of Europe and Asia, and we need to expose the Iranians for who they are. These are radicals. These are men primarily in the Iranian government that would prevent a woman from going out on the street without wearing a hijab. And if she did, she should be killed for not covering her hair. That's a death penalty offense. Not to cover your hair as a female is a death penalty offense. How many of the Western feminists and women's rights activists understand that if you're in Iran and said the things they said, they'd be immediately killed? We need to let people know that they hang gays and lesbians from cranes, that there are no LGBT rights. You know, it's funny, I saw these, when I was at Columbia, I saw a sign that said Queers for Palestine. You know, trying to curry favor with Hamas by, there's no LGBT community in Iran. There is in Israel. There is in America. And we need to expose that. We need to expose the corruption. You know, the people have longing for basic human rights. They want to be able to buy food and fuel and housing for their families and raise their children. Arabs, Persians, Jews, Americans, Israelis. The corruption that's taking place in the Palestinian Authority and in Gaza by Hamas and in the state of Iran is breathtaking. There's a small group of people, primarily elderly men, getting very wealthy off the generosity of the West and of people that are trying to help the Palestinian people, people that hope for the best with Iran. I remember, Ruth, in the lead up to the JCPOA, one of the arguments was, if we lift the sanctions on Iran and give them the hundreds of billions of dollars in relief, that money will go to the Iranian middle class. And Iran will become a wealthy, happy middle class country, and they won't be interested in terrorism and malign activity. And I thought that was a very naive statement at the time, very naive beliefs that were being promoted by the Obama administration, that we were going to, the JCPOA was going to lead to this vast Iranian middle class that would become more democratic, more liberal over time. By the way, the same arguments were made with China, you know, giving China free trade status at the WTO and otherwise. It turned out not to be true. But what happened with that money? It went to the Houthis. It went to the tunnels that we've seen that are breathtaking in Gaza. It went to the Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. It went to the Syrian regime and their weapons programs and their oppression in Syria. So all that money that came from the JCPOA didn't go to the Iranian middle class. It went to fund terrorism. So what do? We expose the corruption. We expose the bigotry, the LGBT and the bigotry, the misogyny against women. And we expose it in a systematic way on the world stage. Next, we expand the Abraham Accords. Well, what's impressed me since October 7th, and I'm sure Meir feels the same way I do, is the endurance of the Abraham Accords has been somewhat surprising. Yeah, the fact that for months, the UAE was the only airline, had the only commercial airlines flying to Israel other than El Al. And people were able to go home from Israel when the Western airlines were too scared to fly to Israel and wouldn't set foot in Ben Gurion Airport. It was the UAE that was sending planes to bring people home. What an amazing turn of events, and what a great result from the Abraham Accords. But they've shown their durability after October 7th. The jihadists and the Iranian extremists weren't able to kill the Accords, which I think they thought October 7th would, and create a regional war. So we got to expand the Accords to all the GCC countries at a minimum. And I think countries like Oman and Kuwait and even Qatar, the KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I think with American backing and knowing that we're going to be there to help defend them against the Iranians, and that our security commitment is rock solid, and that they can rely on the Israelis and the IDF and the Israeli Air Force to protect them from Iran, I think we can expand the Accords. Look, we need to stand up economically to the the Iranians. We've got to return to maximum pressure. The idea that Iran can sell hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of oil to the world market is just absurd. But the blind eye that's been turned to the sanctions enforcement by the Biden administration has allowed Iran to increase their foreign currency reserves. When we left office on January 20th, 2021, Iran had about $4 billion in foreign currency. Essentially, they were bankrupt. They couldn't even pay the salary of the Hezbollah terrorists. And Hezbollah was complaining that they couldn't pay their people because Iran wasn't transferring money. Now Iran has almost $100 billion in foreign currency reserves. How did that happen? It happened because they sold oil, without any restrictions, and we turned a blind eye to it. And finally, we have to stand up using military force where necessary. No one wants another war in the Middle East. We've tried to get out of forever wars, but we can't let the Iranians attack us and kill American soldiers with Kataib Hezbollah, with the Houthis, attack Israelis with Hamas and Hezbollah. Excuse me, we can't allow the Iranians to basically create a buffer zone in Israel. Something very interesting is happening in northern Israel. The buffer zone, which used to be in Lebanon, has now moved south. The buffer zone is in Israel. They've moved the front, and they've displaced 60 to 90,000 Israelis, Druze, Jewish, Christian, Israeli, Jewish. They've pushed the buffer zone into Israel. We can't ever allow our adversaries and the terrorists to put the buffer zones in our countries. The buffer zone has to be in their country. It has to be the Litani River, and the buffer zone has to be in Lebanon. That's because that's where the terror is coming from. The buffer zone can't be Israel. And so we have to stand up militarily where necessary against the Iranians and let them know that there's a very heavy price to pay. But they can't get free shots for claiming there are proxies or there are friends. It's not us that's behind it. And so they have to be put at risk militarily as well. Again, we don't want a new war, but my belief is that if we show strength and we show resolve and we show will, and the Iranians understand that there's going to be a penalty to pay if they kill Americans or kill Israelis, that they'll back off. And the fruits of this idea of peace or strength, it's not who's got the most F-35s. It's not who's got the most aircraft carriers. It's not international bragging rights over the strongest military. The reason we believe in peace through strength is because we want the fruits of peace. We want the Abraham Accords. We want the Serbia-Kosovo deal. We want Ukrainians to be able to go to school and to go to the grocery store and to live in without the threat of rockets hitting them if they leave their home. That's what we want. That's what peace or strength is about. It's about protecting our way of life. It's not about showing who's got the most airplanes or soldiers. But it's going to take us standing up to the Iranians to get to that state. And I think when we show them the resolve that we can, and they understand that there's a penalty to pay, as Hezbollah learned over the past several days, there's a penalty to pay for showering Israel with rockets indiscriminately and killing civilians, killing Druze children playing soccer. But there's a penalty to pay. That's when we'll eventually achieve the state of peace that we're looking for and can live our way of life the way we want.
Ambassador, what can I tell you? Thank you so much for your heartfelt words. I just want to give you the opportunity, perhaps if you want to say something in culmination, perhaps mention if there are any more ways in which one can leverage the US-Israel relationship, in your opinion, perhaps a word about Qatar, Jordan, Egypt. It's truly up to you, just as a word of summary, with your permission.
Well, thank you again, Ruth. And again, it's an honor to be here with you and with Meir and my friends who are watching from Israel. I just want to say that the bond between Israel and the United States is strong. And one of the great honors of my life was Meir and Bibi Netanyahu giving me a certificate when I was at the end of my term in office. I came to Israel for a last visit. And they gave me a certificate saying that a tree had been planted in my honor in the John F. Kennedy Memorial Forest in Jerusalem. And so I feel like I got a little bit of real estate, a tree in your great country, in that beautiful city of Jerusalem. We have shared values. they spring from our Western heritage that comes from Jerusalem and Athens and Rome. And those values that we share as Americans and Israelis will allow us to prevail against the tyrants, against the mullahs, against the evil dictators that seek to destroy us. But it's going to take willpower. Again, I'm confident with the ingenuity and the innovation and the love of freedom that we share, that our future for our kids and grandkids, as difficult as the world may look now, there is a brighter future ahead. As Churchill called it, the sunny uplands. And the sunny uplands are calling us. If we show the resolve necessary to defeat Hezbollah, to defeat Hamas, to defeat the Iranians, to defeat the Russians and the Chinese, there's a great future for the world and especially for the Israeli and American people. And so I'll just end with thanks for the blessings that we all enjoy, and ask again that God bless Israel and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
So from your lips to God's ears, thank you so much, Ambassador O'Brien. Meir, would you be so kind as to say several words of summary and culmination for our audience? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ambassador O'Brien. האמת היא שההסכמה שקיימת מצידי עם הדברים שאתה אמרת כרגע היא כל כך מלאה, עד שאני חושש שאם אני אומר את דעתי בנושא הזה, זה יתפרש כתרגום מילולי מלא של דבריך, כי קיימת הסכמה מוחלטת בין הדברים. בכל זאת, בקיצור נמרץ אני אומר כך, אני מסכים לחלוטין באשר לצורך לחשוף באופן מלא את איראן בפני אזרחי ארצות הברית, מקבלי ההחלטות, על קרבה ועל קריה. אני מזכיר, איראן רואה בישראל את השטן הקטן. יש שטן גדול בעיניה של איראן, וכולנו מבינים למי היא מתכוונת. המאבק בין איראן לבין המערב הוא לא טריטוריאלי בלבד, הוא לא על שאיפות לכוח, הוא על היבטים עמוקים הרבה יותר. אתה ציינת את חלקם. הפער העצום בין הערכים שלהם איראן מבקשת להוביל לבין הערכים שארצות הברית מייצגת, מחייב את ארצות הברית לעצור ולומר כיצד אנחנו מונעים את ההתקדמות של איראן לעבר השגת יעדיה בתחומים הללו. בשעה שאנחנו מדברים, איראן לא עוצרת. היא ממשיכה לפעול כדי לתפוס מאחזים נוספים. ניקח לדוגמה את סודאן, מדינה שעמלנו קשות כדי להכניס אותה להסכמי אברהם, כרגע מנוצלת על ידי איראן בשל מלחמת האזרחים שקיימת שם, איראן מזרימה לשם אמצעי לחימה, והחשש שלנו שהמקום הזה עט יהפוך לבסיס קדמי נוסף של איראן. היא לא עוצרת שם, ישנם מקומות נוספים שבהם היא פועלת באותן שיטות. אם לא יעצרו אותה, היא פשוט לא תיעצר, כי השאיפה שלה היא להתפשט, היא להשליט את ערכיה לכמה שיותר אזורים בעולם. אני רוצה בסיומו של המפגש החשוב הזה, ועל רקע דבריך המרגשים, לומר משהו בנימה אישית. ב7 באוקטובר רעדה האדמה בישראל. על הזוועות של התקפת הפתע המפלצתית של חמאס, נוספה אצלנו גם התדהמה מהכישלון למנוע זאת, וגם ההשפלה הלאומית. אבל מתוך הזוועות של המלחמה נחשף גרעין ה-DNA הישראלי האמיתי. אויבינו מצאו מולם עם כלבי, צבא שהתעשת ופעל כמכונת מלחמה משומנת. עם ישראל ידע לאורך ההיסטוריה אסונות כבדים. מעולם לא שקענו בתהומות ייאוש, רוחנו אף פעם לא נשברה. כשנפלנו, קמנו. מתוך כל משבר צמחנו. הסטארט-אפ הישראלי האמיתי, אמבסדור אובריין, הוא צמיחה מתוך משבר. כי נצח ישראל לא ישקר. אנחנו מקיימים את השיחה הזאת כשברקע ההסלמה בעימות בחזית הצפונית. יש לנו אתגרים רבים מאוד. אנחנו יודעים שאיננו לבד, ומשוכנעים שבכולם ננצח. כי האמת מנצחת, כי הצדק מנצח. ויחד, אני בטוח שנוכל להשיג את האתגרים המשותפים, את היעדים המשותפים, את החזון המשותף, להפוך את האזור ואת העולם למקום טוב יותר, בטוח יותר. אנחנו בפתחה של שנה עברית חדשה, ואני מבקש לברך את כולנו. תכלה שנה וקללותיה, תחל שנה וברכותיה, שנה טובה.
Beautiful words, Meir. Thank you so much. You touched my heart. I'm sure you touched the hearts of many listeners. And with your permission, I'd like to just really say a few words before we finish off. First of all, I'd like to remind everyone, not that many of us need a reminder, but still that there are 101 hostages still held captive in Gaza by the murderous Hamas organization. And we all pray for their safe return home. Also, I'd like to truly give all of our hearts and prayers to the families of those who had lost soldiers in this very difficult challenge in the south, in the north, and in the war, the very just war that Israel is fighting. And to pray for the well-being and for the betterment of those who had been wounded. And I'd just like to say that many in the West are not perhaps fully cognitive of the fact that we have radicalism embedded in Shiite extremist Islam led by the Islamic Republic of Iran on the one hand, and Sunni radical Islam embedded in Qatar and in Erdogan of Turkey, in the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and so on. And this radicalism on both sides is definitely not just out to get Israel and the Jewish people. On the contrary, Israel and the Jewish people is just one small step or one small part of the puzzle. In fact, it is easy to galvanize hatred and antagonism against this piece of the puzzle. But as Meir had said, and as you, Ambassador O'Brien, also said, the issue is to disintegrate societies from within throughout the world, within the region. We saw this in Yemen, we saw this in Syria, we saw this in Lebanon, we saw this in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Iraq. We see this in many countries, in Africa and in the West. There are radical cells of Hezbollah and of the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe, in Canada, in America, and they infiltrate the beautiful democratic realms of everyday life and society, whether it's the young groups, whether it's the freedom-loving groups, whether it's different discourses, university, campuses, and so on. And that is what we need to be vigilant. As Meir had said, Israel is the small Satan, but the radical elements in this world see the United States of America as the big Satan. And that is all the more reason why I see the silver lining in this entire happening, despite it being so tragic. And that is the coming together of people who believe in freedom and equality to fight those who actually have a cult of death, as you yourself, Ambassador, had said. So thank you, everybody, for your patience, for your time, and for your commitment to the values that we all share. And God bless